Under threatening skies, play in the final round of the 1979 Labatt's International Golf Classic at the National Golf Club in Woodbridge, Ontario is well underway. And Canadian Open champion Lee Trevino is the leader. He is 2 over par. He is 1 stroke ahead of Peter Townsend and defending champion Lanny Wadkins. Tom Watson, the year's leading money winner, trails by 4. Dan Halderson is the leading Canadian at 8 over.
This is part of our bonus coverage here at the National, side of the Labatt's International Golf Classic, and we're looking at the 9th green and the threesome of Lee Trevino, Lanny Wadkins, and Dan Halderson. Lee Trevino, of course, leading the tournament right now by 1 shot. He's at 2 over par. This is Danny Halderson from Brandon, Ontario. Danny started the day at 6 over par. He's lost 2 more shots to par. He's now at 8 over.
This hole measures 425 yards. That's Halderson's 3rd shot. Dog leg to the left. And Halderson dropped his shots to par at the 4th and 6th holes today, and otherwise has been level par all the way.
Lee Trevino, our tournament leader by 1 shot. And on the 9th hole, par 4, Trevino has found the bunker.
Just a few moments ago, this was the 2nd shot of Lee Trevino. Pardon me, I put him into that bunker. And there you see his beautiful recovery. Magical touch around the greens. Trevino bogeyed the 1st hole, but birdied the 8th hole. So he's back to where he started at 2 over par. At that stage, of course, overnight he was tied with Peter Townsend at 2 over par, but now Townsend has dropped back to 3 over and is level with this young man, Lanny Wadkins, in 2nd place.
And Lanny Wadkins is a picture of consistency. He's parred every hole on the golf course today, up to the 9th hole. And should he sink this, this will give him a birdie. And, of course, share of the lead with Lee Trevino. Lanny Wadkins for birdie.
You saw that coming up a little shy, really. The greens obviously have lost a lot of their fire with the overnight rain particularly, and a few sprinkles we've had in the last half an hour or so. Very damp atmosphere, and much of the evil has disappeared from some of the more undulating greens. I think it'll be borne out by some of the scores. We've already got a very good round in of Herb Holscheiter of 69 today, which is an excellent performance, which will probably gain him 10 to 15 places.
Dan Halderson lining up his putt on the 9th hole. This is all part of our bonus coverage here at the National, allowing you to see the leaders at this stage in the final round of the Labatt's International Classic. Halderson needing this for par. And he gets it. So Danny Halderson remains at +8 through 9 holes of play in the final round.
And Lee Trevino, who you would probably favor as the great wind player, is certainly bearing out forecasts that he might prevail on the final day, but the breeze here has dropped quite considerably in the last half hour or so. Not as tough as it was a little while back.
Trevino for par. No doubt about it. The moment it left the blade of his putter, you just knew that was in the hole. Lee Trevino is the leader at this stage of the final round of Labatt's International Golf Classic. He has a 1-shot lead over Peter Townsend and Lanny Wadkins.
Here we are on the 10th tee at the National Golf Club, and a very beguiling and beautiful par 3 it is, 176 yards, again played downhill, as is the 15th, But whereas the 15th has water on the left and behind the green, this one, as you can see, has water to the right. Bunker left front and behind. Beautiful weeping willows completing the lovely picture. And of course the final trio waiting for the penultimate trio of Peter Townsend, Tony Jacklin and Tom Watson to finish play on the 10th green before they can tee off, probably with 7 irons. Stan Leonard, weather conditions, much easier now.
Well, Ben, I think the golf course is, without question, playing it just a little bit easier today. I think that the pin placements are just been modified somewhat, and the greens are holding the ball, as you said earlier.
Pin placement on this 10th hole today has been pointed out. The par 3, 176 yards, very much in the front of the green, and I would imagine we're going to see a lot more play in that bunker on the left-hand side. The threesome on the green right now: Peter Townsend, Tony Jacklin, and Tom Watson. Watson, of course, the big story on the PGA Tour this year with his phenomenal success. Very close to $500,000 in earnings.
Yes, Stephen, when you consider that Tommy has actually blown 4 tournaments straight off the reel when he had excellent chances to win, talking about the Canadian Open particularly, where he finished with the last round of 78. He did the same again in the Western Open in Chicago, and then took 81 in the final round of the British Open. And then at Westchester just a couple of weeks ago, he had a round of 74 in his final round. That doesn't sound too bad until you realize that it was the worst score of the top 40 finishers. And yet he's still close to $500,000. Now at the moment, Peter Townsend, we told you, was 3 over par as he came in here. I think he was bunkered in front. It looked very much like that to me. Tony Jacklin, 8 over par. He started at 7 over. And Tom Watson, 6 over, having made a very good forward move from 8 over par. Townsend birdied the first hole, but bogeyed the 6th and 7th. And I believe this is for par. But obviously we'll confirm that as soon as is possible. This is very much bonus coverage, and I'm sure you'll appreciate seeing the leaders fighting out this certain to be exciting finish.
Ben, I should think that we're going to see an awful lot of putts left short today. After yesterday, when the boys just couldn't hold the ball at the cup, today I'm sure that they're going to be coming up short considerably.
Tom Watson doing a little greenskeeping on the 10th green. Remember, this is a par 3, 176 yards. And Tom Watson, he's +6, not +4, but Ben, I would have to think with the abilities that Tom Watson has, certainly not that far out of it, knowing the degree of difficulty on this national course.
I agree with you, Steve. I think I believe you spoke to him this morning, and he said he would attack the golf course, and there's no one can really do that better than Tom Watson. He birdied the 3rd and 6th holes, and he'll give it a whirl. He is never content with just a nice easy check. He obviously, like all the great golfers, he wants to win. Second place is of no interest.
Tom Watson for birdie. And how many times have we seen that happen on this course, on these greens? Around the hole, very, very treacherous. That's just falling off. So Watson will have a short tap in for his par to remain at 6 over. And that brings on Tony Jacklin.
Well, it's nice to see him back in, well, somewhere near the lead again. Being a Briton myself, I had the good fortune to follow Tony Jacklin in the glorious years, particularly when he won the United States Open at Hazeltine in Chaska, Minnesota in 1970. It was obviously the greatest thrill of my life. But there have been an awful lot of lean years, and his last victory was in 1974 until the German Open, the week before last. And here he is in contention again. But with bogeys at the 2nd, 5th and 9th holes, he needs to make a forward move very quickly if he wants to be involved as far as winning is concerned.
Jacklin started the day at 5 over, has since lost 3 shots to par. It's now 8 over. This is part of our bonus coverage here in the final round of the Labatt's International Classic. That camera providing the shot is located on the 10th tee, 176 yards away. Tony Jacklin needing this for his par. And he gets it to stay at 8 over. Now Tom Watson. Just a reminder that after we see the tee shots and the play on the green of Lee Trevino, Lanny Watkins, and Dan Halderson, we will be going to Vancouver for some action from the Women's World Field Hockey Championships taking place on the beautiful campus of the University of British Columbia. Tom Watson. Watson picks up his par to remain at 6 over at this stage in the final round.
And now we move up to the tee and the final trio of the day, in this fascinating character of Mexican origin, although actually a Native American, Lee Trevino. Possibly the greatest manipulator of the ball, wouldn't you say, Stan, in the top class?
Oh, we're talking about playing in wind. I don't think this man has any superior. I think that keeping the ball in play is just, well, he just does it so well.
Probably a 7-iron, I would think, and safely in the center of the green.
Playing with Lee Trevino, Lanny Watkins from Advance, North Carolina. Won the title last year at Shaughnessy. Starts it out to the right side. And he's at the back of the green. He'll have a long putt for birdie. And that brings up Dan Halderson, Brandon, Manitoba. Enjoying considerable success on the PGA Tour, his second effort on the Gold Trail, as they call it.
Yeah, he was very close to the lead in the Tournament Players Championship this year at Sawgrass, which is a similarly awesome place to play golf. But then his back got the better of him, and he finished up getting hospital treatment. Oh, that's in the water.
It
Oh, dear
looks
me.
as if Halderson has indeed found the lake on the right-hand side. Well, on the practice tee this morning, we had a chance to talk to Lee Trevino, and Trevino, as always, was in excellent form.
My thoughts are I hope it rains, because I read the brochure before we started and it said if it was a rain out, it's going to complete at 54 holes. So we wouldn't have to play today. But tough golf course. It's really a toughie. But I said that, in other words, back in July, and I think that the scores show that this golf course is much tougher than Glen Abbey. It's, you know, you have to not only hit... Glen Abbey is a type of golf course that you have to hit sharp iron shots with it, not this golf course. This golf course, you have to hit good drives, good iron shots, and then you don't necessarily, even though you're maybe 6-8 feet away from the hole, it's really not a cinch that you're going to even two-putt, in other words, because of the undulation and the greens and the quickness of them. But it's nice to be back. The Mexicans seem to have a hell of a time in Canada, regardless of their amateurs or pros. So... you never know, you know. Maybe Mr. Clark will give me a citizenship. I don't know. Like to have one.
The thoughts of Lee Trevino at this stage in the final round of the Labatt's International Golf Classic here at National. Lee Trevino is the leader.
Just to explain to you, you probably saw that Peter Townsend had gone from 3 to 5 over par here at the par 3 10th hole. Well, in fact, Townsend went in the water, was then bunkered and took a double bogey 5, and that puts him down to 5 over par. So the situation is that Trevino is at 2 over, Watkins at 3 over, and now Townsend, who shared the overnight lead, is at 5 over par.
But the situation facing Danny Halderson right now, who is very much in the battle for low Canadian here at the championship, he found the water with his tee shot on the 10th, the par 3, 176 yards, and is now going back to take a drop. Lee Trevino and Lanny Watkins, his playing partners, are safely on the green and will have runs at a birdie. Excellent crowds today here. Despite the threat of thunderstorms and rain, I thought that would keep a lot of people away, but it hasn't been. The crowd today is excellent.
Certainly is. And there is the poor gentleman in question in his turmoil amongst the bulrushes. But this hole, of course, with that breeze, what there is of it is from left to right, and the water, as we've told you, has claimed 2 victims in the last 2 groups, and that's a desperate happening for Peter Townsend. That's that double bogey that's really plunged him down the list. He's going to have a fight on his hands.
Dan Halderson was definitely the big story here yesterday when he came up 18 and just made a brilliant shot to eagle par 4 18th. And came in with a round of 68. A magnificent showing by the Brandon, Manitoba native.
And of course, it's not going to hurt Lee Trevino to have seen that Townsend took that double bogey, which caused the delay while Trevino waited and watched from the 10th tee. A rather pleasant situation, particularly when the gentleman in question, Lee, put it right in the middle of the putting surface immediately afterwards.
And now Trevino has another delay, Ben. What sort of an effect will this have on somebody like Trevino, who likes to play very quickly?
Well, I think he's got used to the pace here. Both he and Watkins, I suppose, they're as fast as anybody on the United States tour. But they know, they know the business inside out.
Ben and Steve.
Well, here the official verdict is being given about point of entry into the water as to where Dan Halderson should drop the ball. Rather a pleasant pastoral scene. I'm sure he isn't enjoying it, but this is a very picturesque golf course.
And a very difficult one, as Dan Halderson would probably attest to if we were to talk to him right now here on the 10th hole. So he has made the drop and now has to see how close he can get it. And that's an excellent shot from Dan Halderson, who found the water on the right-hand side and then chipped down, and gets a fine round of applause.
Stan, were you saying something? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Ben, I just wanted to explain the options. The fact that Dan had put the ball in the lateral water hazard. If he could not drop the ball on the side of the hazard facing the green and not be closer to the hole, then he had to go to the other side where the ball had crossed the margin of the hazard and play it from the other side of the hazard. And I think that this is what he was asking Tom, the Rules Committee man.
So Watkins here with a very long putt indeed. I'm sure he'll be happy to get down in 2. Big swing from right to left. Marvelous lag putt.
Ben, in your experience, have you ever seen a man that was a more streaky player than this Lanny Watkins? By streaky, I mean when he gets it rolling, there's just no stopping him.
I completely agree with you, Stan. I didn't see your Canadian PGA Championship last year when he won by 12 shots, but I have seen him win the World Series of Golf at Firestone and the Tournament Players Championship this year, which I was involved in the coverage of. And of course, when he gets going, there's no holding him. And just as certainly when he gets out of sorts, he gets very irritable.
Exactly. Well, he's a tremendous driver of the golf ball and, of course, one of the great putters.
This is Lee Trevino, our tournament leader, at +2, and this is for birdie.
Good-looking putt. Well, he gave it a go. So he still leads by 1 from Lanny Wadkins.
Trevino taps in and remains our leader at +2. And that brings on Dan Halderson, who is lying 3 now after finding the water on the right side and needs this for the bogey 4.
Yes, this battle to be leading Canadian is going to be quite a fascinating one, because we heard earlier that Jim Nelford was 1 under par through 9 holes. That would put him 9 over, and if Halderson makes this for a bogey, then he'll be 9 over too. And of course we can't count out Bob Rose, who started the day at 10 over par.
Halderson does indeed get his bogey, and that puts him at +9. But I'm sure after being in the water, he'll take it. And there's a look at our leaderboard. Lee Trevino, still in front by a single shot over Lanny Wadkins, and Peter Townsend is now at +5. Watson, of course, 4 shots off the pace. Tony Jacklin 6 behind the leader, and then there's Danny Halderson himself.
And now Wadkins for par to remain at 3 over, with a little break right to left. Nothing is a give me on this golf course, as I'm sure you'll see.
So Lanny Wadkins remains at +3.
Welcome back to the National Golf Club. The golf ball in the air is that of Jim Nelford, on its way to the bunker in front of the 15th green, 221 yards, par 3. But a few minutes ago, this was Jim's marvelous birdie putt on the adjacent 14th hole, going straight into the middle for 3 under par today and 7 over in all, and he's bidding fair to be the leading Canadian. That was him coming off the 14th green, and a very fair chance that young Jim Nelford will be the leading Canadian. And there's the members of his navy of supporters. This is Jose Maria Canizares from Madrid, Spain, the Spanish PGA champion, and he's just narrowly missed winning a place in the European Ryder Cup team. Short and to the right. Canizares started the day at 11 over par, is 13 over now.
Third member of this trio is Jerry Anderson from Milliken, Ontario. Jerry with rounds of 73, 76, and 76. Started the day at 12 over par, and as you can see, has lost 5 shots since then. His tee shot on the par 3 15th. And Jerry Anderson comes up with perhaps the best tee shot of the group of Nelford and Canizares on the par 3 15th. But our leader right now is still Lee Trevino at this stage in the final round of the Labatt's International Golf Classic.
We're back at the 14th hole with Tony Jacklin about to pitch. That's his 3rd shot. And the news of Jacklin is that he started at 5 over par and is now 8 over, and that's going to give him a difficult putt if he is to maintain that position. He's not making a bid to win this championship as yet. Peter Townsend We saw him fall foul of the 10th hole, where he took a double bogey to go from 3 to 5 over par. He's dropped another shot, 6 over, playing his third shot at this hole, which measures 421 yards. And that's a pretty sizable putt for his par, too.
The other member of this group is Tom Watson, of course, leading money winner so far this year on the PGA Tour. Jim Nelford in the bunker on the 15th, the par 3. And that's a good out. That's a fine out from there, because that pin is cut so closely to the 15th green for this final round of the Labatt's International Classic. It gives you an indication of just how close the pin is to that front bunker. We speculated some time ago that the bunker would receive considerable play, much more play than it has seen in the first 3 rounds.
Back on the 14th green, players, as they set such a fine example by doing, are doing their gardening and repairing the pitch marks. Tom Watson, Peter Townsend, Tony Jacklin. Tom Watson only 1 under par now today. And at the moment, Lee Trevino cruising very nicely to what would be a unique double if he could win the Canadian Open and the Canadian PGA Championship in the space of 1 season. Tremendous performance for par, Tony Jacklin. Well, that's been the weakness in his game for more years than I care to mention, holing out, and so he goes to 9 over par and is sinking quietly into oblivion down the list.
I had the fortune to play with Tony Jacklin in the Pro-Am here on Wednesday, and a most enjoyable experience it was. A very fine gentleman. This is Tom Watson, speaking of fine gentlemen. Now this is for par. Unlike Jacklin, Tom Watson does pick up his par on the 14th, and he stays at 7 over.
Seems to me, Steve, he has just as good a putting action as Jacklin's is suspect. And I think that's the difference between them. And Peter Townsend, last of the 3, really vital putt for him, this. Tied for the lead overnight at 2 over. He's 4 over so far today and 6 over in all. He's really got to stop the bleeding, and he won't do it that way. So they're retreating in the face of Lee Trevino's charge. And crestfallen Peter Townsend, as well he might be, goes to 7 over par, as is Tom Watson, and of course Jim Nelford, who's made a great run today. And that's where we go now.
Jim Nelford, who caught the bunker on this par 3 15th, 221 yards in length, then blasted out, and has now left himself quite a sizable putt to salvage par and to remain at +7 for the tournament, and as Ben has pointed out, in the running for the Low Canadian, and along with a berth on Canada's World Cup team, which this year will be played in Athens, Greece. Will be a trip for 2 to anywhere in CPR's world. This for par, Jim Nelford. And he's got it.
Beautiful stuff. Well, there we have the leading young Canadian of the moment. What a great par he made at the 15th. But of course it is Lee Trevino who is setting the pace at the rear of the field, 2 shots clear of his nearest rival, Lanny Wadkins, the defending champion. We're back at the 15th tee. with a group of George Knudsen, Bob Rose, and Ben Kern, the host professional here at the National Golf Club. The situation is that Knudsen, who you see here about to play, started it today at 9 over par, is now 10 over. Long iron shot, 221 yards, downhill, wind from the player's left to right, but from the right of your screen, and pretty brisk it is. He's really started that out a long way to the right.
On your right.
And that's where it stayed.
He may have gotten a break off the tree, or possibly the gallery that's surrounding the tree to the right-hand side of the 15th green. But whatever happened, it won't be an easy shot. This is Bob Rose. And Rose coming in with the wood. Not surprising with that wind today.
And blown away on the wind. There'll be a lot of gentlemen use wooden clubs here, I think, before the finish. And there have been already, Steve, as we've seen. The other member of the trio was Ben Kern. And now a marvelous bonus view of that's Lee Trevino. I'm sure no one could mistake that swing. That's his second shot at the 14th hole, a par 4 of 421 yards. What a glorious golf shot.
Lee Trevino, of course, our tournament leader right now at +1. Lanny Watkins should be away with his second shot on this par 4 14th. Downhill towards the green. And he has caught the green, rolling over to the left edge. So he'll have a long putt, whereas Trevino would appear to be in great shape for another birdie. And to drop to even, should he sink that. And as Trevino makes his way to the 14th green, he does indeed have that two-shot lead over Lanny Watkins. We're back, and we're looking at the 15th hole. To be more precise, we're looking at the trouble that George Knudsen has found on the par 3 15th. He pushed his tee shot to the right and now has a very delicate chip shot back across the cart path onto the putting surface here at the 15th. A winner of the CPGA title on numerous occasions. And Ben, he's played this course perhaps more than any other Canadian professional outside of the host Al Balding and the head pro here, Ben Kern.
Yes, that first round, Steve, really did him in. That is Dan Halderson's third shot at the 14th green. Alas, he's in the last trio of Lee Trevino, Lanny Watkins, and himself, and he looks as if at the moment he went to the wrong party, because he's being overshadowed rather by the American rivals. Rather unfortunate.
Back to George Knudsen on the 15th. His second shot. Punches it on to the green low and catches the rough in front of the green, and perhaps doesn't get as far onto the putting surface as Knudsen would have liked.
On the 14th green, we have Lanny Watkins, who is outright second at 3 over par. Putt for birdie to reduce the deficit to 1 stroke. Not this time, however, and Lee Trevino, the leader himself, has a very fine birdie opportunity here to increase his lead to 3 strokes over Watkins. And it would be a brave man who bet against Trevino now. Wouldn't you say, Stan Leonard?
Well, there's no question about it. I think this man has perhaps got as good a command of the golf ball and his golf swing of anybody that I've ever seen play the game. Especially in wind, he can punch the ball, keep it down low, and I don't think anybody today drives the ball any straighter or any better than Lee Trevino. And with that $75 putter that he annexed in the Canadian Open, of course, and proceeded to win, that putter is more than paid for itself.
I'll say. He has it. Well, well. Now that's back to even par to Lee Trevino. And it looks as if the leader may be the only player to match par for the championship, or perhaps even break it.
And Ben, I loved his remark earlier in the day when he said, if Mr. Joe Clark is listening, I would like to take out citizenship or be given the right to come and live in Canada.
Stan, he was alluding to the fact that Canada has been very good to Mexican golfers, and of course referring to the fact that Rafael Alarcon a couple of weeks ago won the Canadian amateur title. So Canada has indeed been kind to Mexican golfers.
We have been invaded.
This is Danny Halderson.
And this to remain 10 over. Nicely done. He's 4 over for the day. But of course, Jim Nelford is now only 7 over and is bidding fair to become the leading Canadian.
Back on 15, this is George Newton, and he needs his putt for the bogey, which he picks up, and unfortunately for George, that puts him at plus 11 through the 15th hole in the final round.
And we're back now at the 16th hole. This hole is a simple-looking par 4 until you reach the putting surface. It's 384 yards long, and here is how Jim Nelford played his second shot from the middle of the fairway just a few moments ago. Only a wedge. And coming up shy, and now a delicate little chip confronts him, and Jerry Anderson from behind the green has just chipped down the full length of the green downhill. But if you're going to miss this green, well, this is the place to miss it, in front and play uphill. Nelford at 7 over par, third shot.
And I dare say Jim probably thinking that he's missed another shot, because although that's not that difficult a putt, there are other positions that are very difficult. It's certainly not within gimme range.
Now, Steve, back to the 15th tee, this elevated tee above the 15th green, 221 yards away. The familiar swing that Tom Watson with the grave digger's arms, flailing the ball, and right of the green, a little long. This really is a very difficult target, because a brave man will hang the ball out over the water to the left, and possibly they don't feel the full force of the wind in that chute of trees.
Next on the tee is Tony Jacklin. Tony started the day at plus 5 and since lost 4 shots to par. That's a good shot from Tony Jacklin. How close? How close? Missing, hitting the pin. I don't think it would have gone in the hole with that force that it had behind it, but oh, so very close.
And lastly, Peter Townsend is to play. He's now tied for third place with Jim Nelford and Tom Watson. Slipped. Losing 5 shots to par so far today. And the double bogey that we saw him make at the 10th hole started the rot. Looks good. No, just short, but not too bad a shot, as you've seen many others go way to the right. Looks rather like a duck's nest, doesn't it, Steve?
Either that or a breeding ground for golf balls, one or the other. I believe those 2 balls belong to Phil Giroux and Dave Barr.
It's quite a problem for them.
Well, this is the problem that confronts Phil Giroux and Dave Barr on the 17th hole. And not only are the golf balls side by side, there's also a tree that is posing something of a problem. Stan, in your knowledge of the game and your past experience, what do you do in such a situation?
Well, in a case like this, of course, the man that is closest to the hole will lift his ball. He'll have to hold it very deftly in his fingers so that he cannot be accused of wiping or cleaning the ball. And they proceed from there, and of course then he will replace the ball in the same position as it originally was. But they have got some real problems.
Now we're back on the 16th with Jim Nelford. I think he played a pretty astute chip shot to make it below the hole, and this is for par to remain at 7 over. Very nicely done for the young Canadian. This boy really must have a great future on the United States PGA Tour.
Well, Ben Wright, if Jim Nelford did have a weakness, I think that he's probably making a lot of believers out of people now by putting left-handed and, of course, playing the rest of his game right-handed. He's maybe have a lot of converts.
Absolutely.
Well, Jim Nelford has certainly made some fine saving putts over the final few holes, and here we have David Barr and Phil Giroux still confronted with the problem of how to flail away at the golf ball in the rough and at the same time extricate the ball from that particular problem with the tree sitting right in front of them.
Back on the 15th, we've got the group of Peter Townsend, Tony Jacklin, and Tom Watson. And that's Peter Townsend in the front of the green. His tee shot barely cleared that large bunker situated in front of the 15th. Now he has a pitch shot down onto the green. And he's left it short. So Peter Townsend will have a testing putt to remain at +7.
Tom Watson is the next away, and there's no finer short game in the world than that of this brilliant player from Kansas City, whose wife Linda is expecting their first child on my own birthday on September the 9th. Well, what did I say? Exquisitely played from the rough, wet grass, which pretty fair indication of the man's genius. Fastest $1 million earner, as you saw, and of course close to $500,000 in a year in 1979. Incredible.
Tony Jacklin will be up next. Jacklin with rounds of 70, 73, 75. Started the day at 5 over par. Is now at 9 over. And this is for birdie. Nope. Jacklin will now have to sink this one for his par on the 15th.
Meanwhile, on the 16th, this is George Knudsen's wedge shot to this wicked plateau green with its vicious slope. And like young Nelford just a few moments ago, coming up shy.
Back to Tony Jacklin on the 15th, needing this to save par. He gets it. So Jacklin remains at +9. Still 9 shots behind our leader, Lee Trevino, but not that far out of second and third place.
Well, Phil Giroux is obviously going to hit first on the 17th, and he is going to knock it away from that tree with a left-handed stroke, and he does quite a good job of removing the ball from that particular position. But now David Barr will have to replace his ball.
Meanwhile, back on the 15th green, this is Peter Townsend for par to remain tied for third place at 7 over. Oh. So now young Jim Nelford is tied with the great Tom Watson for third place, and Peter Townsend drops to 6 over par for the day and 8 over in all. Rather sad debacle. And we, meanwhile, will go up the hill to the tee at this dramatic par 3 that George Fazio and his nephew Tommy have designed here on this incredibly difficult golf course, and our leader, Lee Trevino.
Now hit it fast. Get up, boy. Get up, baby.
Trevino thought he might have hit it fat, but he's on the putting surface anyway, and we'll have another run at birdie.
And he's in a very fortunate position, Steve. The only man that he's got to fear now, really, is Lanny Watkins, and he can watch what young Watkins is doing alongside him.
On the 16th, this is George Newton, his third shot on the par 4, chipping up. And that's an excellent shot from George Newton.
And back on the 15th tee, the quick, wristy, hands-low swing of Lanny Watkins. Stan Leonard, that's an unorthodox swing, but it seems to work.
Ben, that is, as you say, unorthodox. The address position being so low like that usually creates a great amount of wrist action, and if anything is, if you can fault his game, it is the fact that his game can become a little bit wristy, or his swing.
But at the moment, he's doing very nicely, Lanny Watkins, is 3 over just as he started.
As we wait for Dan Halderson to play his tee shot on 15, Dave Barr duplicated the effort of Phil Giroux, and he removed his ball from that particular problem left-handed as well.
Come in, bring it in.
That's the tee shot of Dan Halderson on the par 3 15th, and he has hit a beauty. As Lee Trevino makes his way down to the 15th green, he has a 3-shot lead over Lanny Watkins in this, the final round of the Labatt's International Golf Classic. We're back on the 15th, the par 3, and awaiting the putts of Lee Trevino, Lanny Watkins, and Dan Halderson. Lee Trevino hit the green with his tee shot, but is a long way from the hole. Pin today cut on the right side of the green, just in front of a large gaping bunker that Trevino wanted no part of, and I suspect Ben Wright at this stage in the game, the strategy, the thinking of Lee Trevino is just simply hit the greens.
I quite agree with you, Steve. It's all he has to do now, isn't it? Really par in and see if Watkins can do anything about it. And then if Watkins does do something about it, then he can pull out the stops himself.
Lee Trevino for birdie on the 15th. He's at even par. This will put him under. He had the speed, but not the line. If Trevino can keep playing the way he's been playing through 15 holes, he could pick up the double. Canadian Open winner Glen Abbey earlier this summer. And he can add the Labatt's International Golf Classic title to that. The last Canadian to win the Canadian Open was Pat Fletcher back in 1954. We've never had anybody do the double.
And that's Peter Townsend playing his second shot of the 16th hole of 384 yards, safely short of the hole and down the slope back to the 15th.
Lanny Watkins for birdie. Watkins alone in second place right now at +3. And like Trevino, he had the speed, but not the line.
After a huge drive, Tony Jacklin. second shot at the 16th hole. And haven't we seen a lot of them come up shy there?
Like so many before, Tony Jacklin, not wanting to get above the hole here on 16, decided to perhaps play up short. Back on 15, we have Dan Hallerson.
That was Watson's second shot coming up to the 16th green.
Now we can go back to Dan Hallerson. Hallerson for birdie. And again, it looked like he had the right speed, but unfortunately the ball fell off left of the hole. So Hallerson will have to settle for par. But right now, this is Lee Trevino doing a little groundskeeping. Trevino, our leader, at even par. Needs us to salvage a 3 at the 15th and retain his 3-shot lead with only 16, 17, and 18 to play. Trevino now tapping in for bogey, so Trevino goes back to +1 and now has a 2-shot lead.